this narrative that there's only one way to deal with this and that this way is actually going to stop it. Well, if it is going to stop it, why do you care who gets it? You should just get it. Because if you get it, that means that no one else is going to. You're never going to get it. Everybody who gets the shot is never going to get it. That was the narrative. That was a lie from the beginning. And now we're realizing that it was a lie. Everybody realizes it was a lie now. Like I was talking to someone last night that had COVID really bad after being vaccinated. Like really bad. 2 weeks wrecked.
So I have a great friend, and his daughter, college, gets the shot. She ends up in the emergency room, and she's got blood clots on her liver. And they're all like, what do you think of it? Well, she rows a lot on the row team, and like, are you really gonna believe that's what it was?
Well, people do anything to not blame it on the vaccine. Like when there's an injury, like people want to find all sorts of other reasons.
That was Joe Rogan making some comments about vaccine injuries, which come as new NBC News reporting details the allegedly thousands of Americans who say that they have symptoms of life-altering tinnitus ringing in the ears after they took the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, as of Sunday, at least 16,000 people had filed complaints with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that they developed tinnitus, or ringing in their ears, after receiving a vaccine. The CDC conducted internal reviews of the reports. They did not find any data specifically suggesting a link between COVID-19 vaccines and tinnitus, according to an agency spokesperson.
Despite the CDC's findings, researchers like Xiaowen Bao, an associate professor at the physiology department of the College of Medicine at the University of Arizona, Tucson, are beginning to dive deeper into the possible link, according to the NBC News report. Bao, who has been studying tinnitus for over a decade, was convinced to look into the issue after getting messages on Facebook. After surveying roughly 400 cases from the online group, along with ringing in their ears, participants reported a range of other symptoms, including headaches, dizziness, vertigo, ear pain, anxiety, and depression. Significantly more people first developed tinnitus after the first dose of the vaccine compared with the second. So far, Bao believes that ongoing inflammation, especially in the brain or spinal cord, may be to blame.
So this is all quite preliminary. The CDC looked into this and didn't find the evidence that you might like to see, but they also didn't release the full report. They have done that with the myocarditis claim, so you can judge for yourself. Not able to do so in this case. I was interested and frankly kind of heartened that NBC News, a very textbook mainstream outlet, is taking this concern very seriously, wrote this pretty good news article about it. Want to apply a lot of caution here because tinnitus, again, ringing in the ears, is something that actually a lot of Americans suffer
Apparently,
from.
25% of Americans suffer from it, and there's this question.
To some degree of it. Might not be severe tinnitus.
Sure. And these people are registering severe symptoms that apparently manifest after their first shot.
Including that doctor looking into it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's worth noting that a lot of people are going to experience these symptoms anyway, and that it might be you have these preconditions for tinnitus that are perhaps exacerbated by the vaccine. Obviously, we don't know. People are looking into it. But it is worth noting that, one, the CDC hasn't found a link yet, although, as you've pointed out, they haven't released the review the way they have in the context of myocarditis and other side effects. That 16,000 complainants, which is about what the number we have here, equals about 1 in every 15,000 vaccinated Americans. So again, the odds are relatively low still. And again, 25% of people are going to.
But that's just the number of people, who actually went ahead and reported to the CDC, I'm having bad tinnitus and I got vaccinated. There are probably a lot more people out there who have tinnitus or got tinnitus. Maybe it was after a vaccine and haven't reported it, so we can't.
Sure.
And maybe they were going to get tinnitus anyway. Maybe they already had it. Might have nothing to do with the vaccine. That's the the difficulty in looking at some of these things, including like the blood clot issue that Joe Rogan's guest was talking about there. And that's a more unlikely complication, especially for a very young person who is an athlete, a rower, etc. That's why this whole idea of requiring and forcing vaccines on people, as again many colleges have, seems so wrongheaded to me when we don't look, we don't have. I want to be careful how I say this. I don't think there's a lot of really strong evidence of serious risk and serious dangers associated with the vaccines. But we also know that a lot of the things that were said by experts about the necessity of being vaccinated to keep yourself safe from infection from COVID even did not pan out. And if we're looking at age groups where the COVID risk is very low, and maybe the vaccine risk also very, very, very low, but how can you say, as like an expert or a policymaker, that I'm taking that choice away from you? How could that be? That has to be to the individual to decide in consultation with their doctor. Maybe they have some precondition that makes them more at risk of blood clots or even Tinitus. Theoretically, they might make a different vaccine decision than someone else. That should absolutely be their right. It's ludicrous.
Yeah, as the benefit goes down when the risk reward calculation,
and the social benefit going down to almost nothing.
Yeah, as the reward goes down, you don't actually have to prove that the risks are especially high to have a good argument against not pursuing a vaccine, or at least not requiring the vaccines. So that's kind of the world we are in now, where we've shifted dramatically from what we had hoped the vaccines would offer in terms of protection from the virus in the early days, and especially now that people have immunity from having gotten COVID, et cetera, et cetera. We're in a different world. I think what was so remarkable about this piece in particular was simply the fact that it was being covered, a story like this about vaccine consequences, vaccine side effects, is being covered in a mainstream institution. As many people pointed out online, they, one, were willing to credit the story simply because it appeared in NBC. And two, the fact that it did appear in NBC, given there's been so much pushback against the idea of like fomenting vaccine hesitancy in the mainstream press, that they were like, well, this must really be a story. This must be really credible, because otherwise this type of institution wouldn't carry the story. Now, I don't know that that's necessarily fair. We've seen an interesting kind of opening up of discourse spaces about COVID in the last few months, whether it is the lab leak theory now being kind of a more mainstream valid theory now that it has gotten the okay from various government agencies, that it's more likely to have come from lab leak than a zoonotic origin. And now this open conversation about not COVID side effects, but COVID vaccine side effects. I mean, should we read anything at all into what appears to be a shift in the discourse? I mean,
I'm applauding this shift in the discourse, but it's just what should have been all along.
And some people are upset. Are upset that there needs to be some apology. Some people are saying, I've been talking about this for a long time when I was dismissed as a crank. And still, we don't know that this is anything. And maybe we'd be less,
as a society, maybe we'd be less polarized and radicalized. Maybe people would be less, certain people would be less inclined to just disregard everything they hear from health officials because it was just so one-sided for so long. Yet, the concerns about spreading vaccine-related misinformation, I mean, content moderation decisions were made on that basis on social media platforms. We've seen that over and over again. That Facebook, for instance, essentially outsourced its content moderation to the CDC itself, and the CDC took the position that basically any claim you would make that would be negative about vaccines, even vaccines for children, is something that could cause hesitance and is not something that should be allowed. It was harmful on that basis. And that was just such a wrong way to try to control the access to information that people have. Is not that's not a healthy way of looking at this entire debate. It was not instructive for public debate, and it's gotten to us to where we are now. So I was glad to see NBC cover this like this. I would have wanted to see coverage on all the other COVID-related issues in the past.
If the door is open, the door is open. It is also interesting timing, it seems to me, given that RFK has this new candidacy that is surging in some ways, and that the main attack that the mainstream political press seems to be making at him is the idea that he is a vaccine skeptic, talking about some of his past statements linking vaccines to autism in a way that the medical community has not linked vaccines and autism. And I think more substantively for the current moment, being very skeptical of a lot of COVID-era policies which have not necessarily stood the test of time. So if he is surging at the same time that the broader public is a lot more open to discussions about vaccine risk, vaccine skepticism and things like that, it could be rather auspicious timing for that particular candidacy.
Right, and if some in the mainstream are worried or wondering why are people listening to RFK Jr., remember that
why.
Joe Biden said that if you get the vaccine, you're not going to get COVID, and that turned out not to be true.
Yeah.
Tomorrow on Rising, Brianna and I will be back right here to bring you all the biggest news of the day. Hopefully no more cable news firings. Who knows? We're holding on for dear life. No, not really.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
See you back here tomorrow.
Goodbye.